City University Television presents the American Theater Wing Seminars. Working in the theater. This seminar, performance.
A warm welcome to the American Theater Wing's Working in the Theater Seminars, now in their 25th year, coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. These seminars offer a rare opportunity to explore the realities of working in the theater. Today's seminar is devoted to performers. We will learn how they became professionals, their work ethic, and their reasons for being in the theater. We hope that you will enjoy and learn from today's experience. I'm Isabel Stevenson, Chairman of the Board of the American Theater Wing. And now, let me introduce our moderators. For this seminar, first, a distinguished member of the theatrical community and Chairman of the Board of Eugene O'Neill Theater, George White, and Pia Lindstrom, theater critic and TV personality. Now, please.
Thank you. And next to me is Swoosie Kurtz, fantastic performer that we have all enjoyed so much. She's won 2 Tony Awards for 5th of July and House of Blue Leaves, and now she is a double threat in the Mineola Twins. She's also won an Emmy and 9 Emmy nominations. And next to her, the fantastic Dennehy, who former football player who gave up the playing fields for playing on the boards. He's been in over 40 films, but it is for his theatrical performances that I think he is going to be just honored for years. He is, as you know, Willie Loman in Death of a Salesman, and it is a riveting performance. George.
Thank you, Pia. On my immediate left is Elizabeth Franz, who is recreating her 1998 role of Linda Loman in Death of a Salesman. And also won the nomination for Tony and Drama Desk Awards for Kate Jerome in Brighton Beach. Next to her is the extraordinarily well-groomed Matthew Broderick. Today, in joke, sorry about that. And who is playing Dan in Night Must Fall and is the Tony Award winner for his performance in How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. On the far left, which is not a political statement, but actually is Kathleen Chalfant, who actually was the understudy for Elizabeth Franz in the Playwrights Horizons Sister Mary Ignatius tells it all for you, explains it all for you, right? There you are.
Played many times. And
played it on Sundays, I think. But actually now she is doing a wonderful performance of Vivian Baring in the marvelous play Wit, currently in Pia, over to you.
Yes, to get things started, each one of you has, in this play and in another place, a moment that you coalesce somehow the whole meaning of the play, I have noticed. And I direct this specifically to you, Elizabeth Franz, because you've done it a couple of times in other plays, and you do it again. And I'm very interested in the development, as you read the text, how you arrive at the central core moment.
That's a wonderful question, because it is from reading the play with your fellow actors. And as we're sitting around, look how long did we work around this table and read and discussed it and said, now this moment is this and this moment is that and this, and that's what, and then when we get up on our feet and then the characters become developed inside of us, before we know it, those moments are there, and they're magical in a way. through the eyes of the other actors. You know, it becomes, it's a total ensemble effort of developing that, those moments.
I think, you know, Pia, bringing that up also relates to the whole business of research, of researching a character too, which comes into that too.
Which we all do have different ways of researching.
I think Elizabeth was a little startled when she got working with us. Falls and I have done a lot of stuff together, and we spent the first 2 weeks of the rehearsal period telling stories.
Funniest stories you've ever heard in your life.
The last thing in the world you would think if you walked into that rehearsal room is to think that these people were rehearsing Death of a Salesman. Hell's a Poppin' might be more like it. Because, but there is some kind of catharsis that comes out of all this.
We became a family that way,
And,
through those stories.
And I think it's also true that the more difficult the material, the more laughter there is in the rehearsal period, because you have to keep yourself alive. And it's
because it seems so impossible to do. Yes.
Yeah.
Brian.
And I wanted to add something to what Elizabeth said about these moments coalescing, because you begin with the text and then the company, and then the final part of the equation is when the audience comes.
The audience, yes.
And that
lead you.
makes the moments fly.
Do you play off the audience? That is, it
Yes.
stimulates you to
Yes.
You can
And I mean, it's
hear it.
who
You hear
you're
what? Breathing.
communicating
We're
with.
not that
so-
noisy in the audience, are we?
No, but you can hear the silence, the attention.
There's a palpable energy and an electricity that either comes or doesn't. I mean, that's one of the exciting and terrifying things about live theater, and I think one reason we all do it is that immediacy of, like, you're all giving us energy right now, we're getting energy from you, we're giving... It's really tangible. I mean, it's an electromagnetic field that and some nights you'll go out and there's no electricity in the air. And no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, and you just, you know, you tend to push it then, which is bad, it ain't going to be there that night. Some chemical reaction of that collective, you all take on a collective personality. And some nights it's just, you can't put a foot wrong. It's just like you're just channeling. The play is playing itself.
Those
Amazing.
nights when you feel like you're performing to a group of tuberculosis patients.
They laugh on the punchline.
February is a particularly...
I always want to stop the show and say, okay, now everybody cough. Go ahead, cough for the next 2 minutes. All right, that's it? Fine, let's go on.
And people have various strategies about coughing. There are people who cough on the punchline, and then there are people who wait for the silences, thinking that they won't...
How about this one?
The ones that drive me nuts are the ones sitting out there saying, I'm here too. What about me?
But then that's where the professionalist comes in. What do you do when you have that kind of an audience? As a professional, what do you do?
My teeth are worn down, I'm going to tell you, from grinding my teeth.
Trying to keep them quiet.
I think, well,
I'm instantly in a rage. Is what happens.
Really? It makes you angry.
Sometimes. But I find that I have to, every now and then, remind myself not to just focus. Sometimes you can get obsessed with that, and particularly if you've been in a run for a while, suddenly you find yourself, all I'm doing is listening to whether 3 people cough in this moment or 1 person coughed. And maybe somebody did have a cough, you know, it doesn't always mean, well, it's true. And so sometimes I think it's good to remember that there is a play on stage too, you know, like not to, you know what I mean? You can go, although you're always, definitely always
you play
listening.
kind of crazy guy, so maybe it would feed into your rage there in this play you're doing. So maybe you could use it. Maybe.
Yeah. No, you try to use.
You don't have the
everything.
luxury of Kurt Mazur, who walked off the podium because of the coughing and then walked back out.
right,
Although there's
right.
something for you to try.
Sometimes it's hostile. Sometimes the
Yeah,
coughing is a way of saying I don't like this. I think.
Sometimes you can't do
You
it.
can feel it.
You can't feel that.
Sometimes.
Yes, you can.
Sometimes.
They're not really giving
This is I already get where you're going. You know.
I think when there are those moments that we were talking about, nobody coughs.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, that's why
don't
you think, 'cause other
because
times
I've
it's
been in
like-
theaters, it's dead silence,
Yeah, that's a
and you
great
wonder where the
feeling.
coughers are, and I think that you just don't
Yes.
cough at that.
Well,
point.
that's why it's so frustrating, because you know that when you have those moments and all of a sudden everybody forgets to cough, obviously most people don't have to cough when they do. But I think you're right. I think you're right, Matthew, about the fact that it can indicate. I think maybe that's what's so frustrating about it.
Yeah.
because it indicates to you I'm screwing up here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's our
Lack of
responsibility.
interest.
Our job is
I've
to
done something wrong.
communicate the text.
Ralph Richardson described acting as the art of keeping 800 people from coughing. and that's not a bad definition.
Yeah.
There was one of our
Our job is to keep them from coughing.
And I think that one of the things you do when that happens, when you begin to feel that you're losing the audience, and it can be coughing or the dread cellophane, I actually feel people should be patted down for cellophane before they come into the theater. But
How about phones?
phones are bad.
That's the latest.
We get that a lot.
We get
What about the cardboard cups with the ice in it, though?
Oh, that's
That's something brand new. They're supposed to make sure that the cups are not there, but you hear the guy clicking it and the ice clicking against the cardboard.
I love this.
I'll tell you something. What a motive for homicide that is.
But I think what you do finally, after you get over the immediate rage, figuring out what row the guy is in, is try harder. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. You know, you just sort of set the job here is to get people's attention, and that's what you do finally. Because usually we don't pick up set pieces and hurl them into the audience, which is the immediate response. Because indeed it is a partnership between what's going on the stage and what's happening in the audience.
You also can't focus on that one person who's screwing it
Right.
up for
Because
everybody
there-
else, because you know there are the
799 people.
silent
hundreds of other
majority.
people. I mean, in the middle of the
Loves
play
it.
the other night, this woman, I don't know if she just had a little synapse or what, but she went, "Debbie!" There you are. And I almost went, "Huh?" And I had to like really work. She suddenly thought she saw Debbie, and she'd been looking for her for years, you know. And then people who talk out loud, who are used to watching television, and the other night, because I'm playing identical twins. We gotten through the entire play with just wonderful silence and attention and laughs. And suddenly, in the last scene, this woman way back in the house goes, "Which one is she?" And it's like, oh, she's followed it up till now. You know, so you just have to concentrate, focus.
And what's interesting is that you know from all of us that there are two kinds of consciousness going on all the time on the stage. The consciousness that's in the world of the play, and you know we're not insane, so we know what's happening in the outside world. And for years you think, oh my God, there must be something wrong with me, until you talk to your colleagues and discover that everybody does that, and that's
Don't you
the
wish,
job.
though, that you... Can I ask you other actors? Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Don't you wish you could turn off that little editorial voice that's always watching you? Oh, that was good. Oops, missed that laugh. Whoop, that didn't go.
Well, when
that
you're
was
at
better
your
last
best,
night.
when you're at your best, don't you think you're not hearing that when you're at your best?
Yeah,
Or it's
that's
very...
When the odd time when you have a good time or a scene goes,
You're just...
and you think, wow, I don't even know why that went well, but it went well.
and you
That's
just
what I
flew
find
through
the
it.
feeling
That's why
is.
you're not-
But
in
you
the
can
dressing room.
always remember afterward what happened, which is a kind of wonderful, a wonderful thing. It's quite a remarkable
Salesman
thing
is
to
interesting because it
do.
makes people talk back to the cast. Howard Witt plays Charlie, and there's this great scene towards the end of the play where he, in effect, offers me a job out of charity. And we've got that scene pretty honed with somebody says, "I'll give you a job, just for the hell of it, whatever it is." And there's this pause. And somebody in the audience says, "Take the job!" And I say to myself, Jesus, if I did take the job, we could all go home right now.
We still have 45 minutes.
I wouldn't mind some nights.
What's the difference?
I got to face Kevin Anderson at the end when he beats the crap out of me for about 5 minutes.
Well, you know, there is the old vaudeville thing, which was the old rubric, which is if they cough, go back 5 minutes. That's really for playwrights. You know, back up 5 minutes, because somewhere 5 minutes earlier you lost them.
Lost him.
Do you see a difference in audiences? And as you have gone through from play to play through the years, is there a difference in today's audience to the ones 10 years ago?
No, I mean,
Going to the theater?
it's always interesting to me that people often attack the audience, and I've been in the theater in New York for 26 years and played only for American audiences, and I find them astounding.
New York audience.
New York audiences are
Yes.
amazing, smart.
They're not better than Chicago.
I don't know. I've never played in
Chicago's a great
Chicago,
town.
but I mean American audiences, because
Yeah.
I think we've all played all around the country.
Best audiences I've ever played to were in Dublin, I have to tell you. We did The Iceman Cometh in Dublin, and they were the smartest. There's a whole sequence that starts in the first act when Jimmy Tomorrow, he's always talking about, I'm going to go to the laundry tomorrow, I'm going to get my suits out of the thing, and what happens, it's a repetition of a theme, and usually by the third or fourth time he does that, the American audiences would start to laugh, getting the joke. This is a guy who's always talking about tomorrow, which of course is true. In Dublin, because of the Irish, the first time he said it, there was a scream, because they knew exactly what the guy was about.
Knew where you were going.
They were so smart. They're such a literate bunch over there.
Was this at the Abbey or the
At
Gate?
the Abbey, yeah.
Yeah.
But I find our play is about cancer and John Donne. You would think box office poison, but in fact, people have been coming, and the audiences are immensely sophisticated about John Donne. And it's everybody. Now, we've now run out of our friends, so it can't just be people we know. These are audiences are coming to the play. And I think that people come if it's good. And if it's good, people get what it is that you're, in fact, not what you're, but what the writer is trying to say. Because in the end, that's what we're doing. Our job is to communicate what the writer meant to say. And people, I'm now in this play called Wit, and the last play that I was in that won a Pulitzer Prize was Angels in America, another extremely difficult and then very long play. This is a short one, this is a very long play. And people flocked to it and understood it. It was very difficult and sophisticated because it was good.
That's what's so exciting this year.
Yeah.
This year is so exciting because there are so many wonderful plays on, serious, straight plays. Some 3 hours, ours is 3 hours, 10 minutes sometimes.
Yeah, unfortunately, most of them are 50 years old.
Yeah.
Yes.
Unfortunately,
Yes.
we're discussing that. The American playwright is an endangered species right now. But we do have these wonderful plays, whereas last year it was all musicals, a few years back. And here we are. We have a community of actors that we see each other constantly. Now we're all back on the boards. It's the most exciting season in many, many years.
I bought a boater yesterday.
You did?
Yeah, a straw hat I'm going to start wearing. Back on the boards.
Back on the board. Well, you know, that is
Spats,
interesting.
I mean,
That, of course, Wit is a new play. And it brings me back to the idea of research, too, because I mean, the plays, almost all the plays that are represented here, with the exception of Wit, have had a life. And I wonder how influenced or non-influenced you are with the roles. I mean, you know, Lee J. Cobb was the first one, and I'm just thinking about it. I can't go back to Night What's Well. I don't know who played Dan, but I wish I could haul that one out of my memory. I didn't see it.
Emlyn Williams,
Was
the writer.
Williams. It was
He wrote
Williams.
it- wrote it
Okay.
for himself.
And
Yeah,
Robert
wrote it for
Montgomery
himself,
did
yeah.
the movie, and Albert Finney did another movie.
Yeah. So how influenced are there's a lot of things I want. And the other thing is, having come out of, in terms of Salesman, you did it in Chicago. There was a hiatus to a degree, wasn't there, between that and here. How do you get that back, or what do you do? Did you change anything from Chicago to here?
Well, the
these
set
are a lot
had
of questions.
changed. The set had been reduced, much smaller. And, but we just went back to the boards. We went back to the table, sat around and read it, and we had Arthur there.
The difference was that Arthur was
Arthur
there,
there.
which was
Yes.
a little bit intimidating. I kept watching. We were rehearsing on stage.
Yeah.
Arthur sitting at the table next to Bob Falls, the director, and I was watching Falls, and Falls was watching Miller.
right. Yes.
But we got through it all right. He liked it. So,
Yeah.
and he had wonderful notes.
Wonderful.
Extremely
notes.
helpful.
Oh.
I mean, why shouldn't he be? You know? But he was great, and he loves this production, and he's been a real part of it. So that's been a real positive.
But and it was exciting having those 6 weeks off because we were rested. Also, the character had lived inside of us, knowing that it's coming out again, and it kind of like soup. It just gets flavored.
Well, also, there was a kind of an extraordinary tension about this situation because of the 50th anniversary. They decided to reopen the play on exactly the 50th anniversary, so there was a tremendous amount of hoopla about it, and that's good and bad. it can really take your focus away. But we all survived it. We got through it, and it's
What's the
been-
bad part of it? I know it's
Well,
the good
it's
part of it.
distracting. It can be distracting. You know, you say to yourself that last week before you open, you say, if I can just get through all of this stuff and just do the play.
Yes.
And of course, you never really get through all the stuff, but
Because there's always something
There's
else
always
out
something
there
else,
now. No.
But it's the judging, which is often the most difficult part of a production. And you just think, if we get through the day when the New York Times comes, then we get the play back, whatever happens.
Yeah.
Whatever anybody says, whether it's well received or not. From the day that the New York Times comes until the play closes, it's ours and the audience's.
we had the very
It's a
peculiar
great
situation
feeling.
of having gotten
Yes.
a rave review from Ben Brantley in the New York Times in Chicago, which is one of the reasons why the play came to New York. And so now we're opening in New York, and we're going to get reviewed again.
Do it again, yes, I know. It's
I'm
scary.
saying to myself, the way my career goes,
I know.
he'll hate it in New York.
We were all saying that.
But,
I know. We were,
No,
we were
not
we were
that.
terrified.
Thank God.
It's a terrifying
Well,
situation.
yours is not reality-based. We have these heavy stories going on here. You are in a fantasy world here.
But a serious
Surreal
play, this
you
play,
play.
too.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's very real in a way. When I first read it, I thought, this is brilliant, but I don't understand a word of it. I mean, I really didn't. The writing is so breathtaking, and it's hilarious, but it is very dark and very biting and painful underneath. And it's just a feast for an actor. I just get to do everything.
Yes, you're two people. So
Yes.
I not only
took
get
all
to
the
play,
parts.
yeah, I took all the parts. All those times in your life as an actor where you're saying, God, I wish I had more scenes. I wish I had more lines. Why couldn't I have gotten her part? You know, you're sitting backstage reading or needle pointing. I'm going like, can we cut this speech? I mean, I never stop talking, except I'm off stage. The only time I'm off stage is to make 17 split-second wardrobe and wig changes.
Yes.
An intermission. And, but it's, yes, unlike your guys, it's a brand new play by Paula Vogel. And it's brilliant. Yeah, not only do I get to play two people, Myra and Myrna, the good twin and the bad twin, but I get to play them from age 17 to like late 40s. So really I'm playing 8 or 10 different people, because you're a different person at 17 than you are at 35, whatever. And we start in the Eisenhower administration, we go through to the Bush-Reagan years, and it's a ride for me and the audience.
What did you do for research on that?
I've
did
never
you?
been to Mineola.
Oh, gee.
I believe in research to a certain extent, as much as it's practical, as much as it will immediately help you apply to the play. I just don't, I don't think that you have to have gouged out your lover's eyes to play Medea. I don't think that, that's what we do. I mean, that's our technique, is what if I wanted to murder someone? What if I, that's where the imagination comes in, and that's where our art comes in. And obviously, yeah, if you're playing a doctor or you're playing, definitely as much research. In film and television, very often, you have no time for research. But you just learn to make
the
really quick
playwright does a
choices.
lot of research for you.
Right.
And mentions the correct amount of things. It's our job to make it alive, to bring it up and make it spontaneous and alive. And you can get too far into your head with research, and something like the Swoosie is doing, you can't. You've got to be fast.
I mean, I'm an only child, for instance, so I've never had a sister, and I've played a lot of sisters, and I'm now playing two sisters who basically want very, very much to connect, but they also want to kill each other. I mean, it's that sibling thing that is something alien to me. Now, that I had to do some research on, because I've never wanted to kill, my sister. People talk about when they grew up and they wanted to strangle their brother and they tried to bash his head into this pavement, and this was like, really? I mean, this was so foreign to me.
You could use your agent.
As a matter of fact,
There's
no,
your sense memory, yeah.
right, so you use you use those other things in your life where you have wanted to bash someone's head in.
When did you first get the play?
Pardon?
When did you first get the play in California?
I got the play in July. I've known I was going to do it since July. And we had a reading of it at the Roundabout in New York, and we all just read through it. And it was just, you know, instantly we all fell in love, and that was it. And they said, you got to do it. And I said, I got to do it. And they said, you know, the theater's got to do it. And so pretty much since then, I've known. But there's only so much work you can do at home, you know, before you get with the other
When
you have
everybody
to
gets together. That's when it's...
Kathleen, there is tragically, you know, I was reading about how much your older brother influenced you. Now that must have been, I mean, that was unfortunately on-the-job research, if you will, and that must have spoken to you a great deal, did it not?
It did. It's one of those odd times when your life and your work come together in a...
You might explain that a little bit.
In fact, the day that the play came to me, this play, which is about someone who was dying of ovarian cancer, I discovered that my brother, who was my much older brother, my 14-year-old brother, who had been my mentor, had been diagnosed with cancer. And the passion, I like to call it, of his cancer exactly coincided with the making of this play. So that in an odd way, he died just a year ago on the 17th of April. And we did the first production of this production of the play at the Long Wharf Theater the fall before. So I learned from the play in some way how to help my brother at the end of his life, and I learned from my brother's dying how to play the end of the play. And it's been the whole play has been a kind of memorial to him, and he'd have liked all of this a lot. He'd have liked all the stuff, and I sincerely hope that he's hanging around somewhere, because it would mean a great deal to him. But that was a time in which life informed work, but in a way that I couldn't. It's interesting, after we came back and began working again for this production, the production of Wit that's going on now, people said that the end of the play was different. And I hadn't consciously changed it, but I just knew more. And I think that happens, it's one of the luxuries of playing a play for a long time or being able to go back to it, because every time you go back to it, you know more not only about the play, but you know, whatever has happened to you in the interim informs the play. And it's wonderful to have the play so much in your mind and your muscles that you can you don't, there comes a time, mercifully, when you don't have to worry about where you're supposed to be and what you're saying. You can just, that's there, and life begins to inform the work, and it's a wonderful thing. That's the good thing about a long run. People always say, do you get bored? And if the writing's good, I think not, or I mean, eventually you get bored. But not for a long time, because life and your relationship with the audience and what happens to the company, the way it changes, is always informing it. And then the director comes back and tells you to put it back the way it's supposed to be, which is always good, to take out the improvements.
Where did you learn all these things that you're now putting into place? Where did you start?
I acted when I was a kid in high school. I grew up in California, in Oakland, California, and I was in a theater group there, taken there by somebody, and my father used to come and take me away at midnight, saying that I'd been a slave. And then I went to college thinking that I was going to study the theater, and I didn't. I studied classical Greek instead, and I was on my way to getting a master's degree in classical Greek, and I met my now husband and said to him, you know, I really don't want to teach Greek in prep school. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I always wanted to be an actor. And he said, well, why don't you do that? And so I did, and I began in a strange way. I didn't ever go to acting school. We were married. I went to Europe, and I studied in Europe with someone, and then we came back, and we moved to New York when I was 28, and I began to study with Win Handman, and I've worked in the theater in New York for 26 years, doing mostly new plays and being incredibly lucky in the writers that I've worked with. My first big thing was Jules Pfeiffer's Hold Me. And then Sister Mary. So I've made my way slowly, and I've been lucky because I've had the luxury of staying in New York and doing what I like.
Matthew?
Yes.
What's your story?
Yeah, what's your story?
Yeah, what's your story?
Yeah, my whole life.
We have about 4 minutes.
Debut at
4
17.
minutes?
Yeah.
Start there. Debut.
My debut was in Torch Song Trilogy when I was 19
Before
years
that.
old. Before that?
17.
Okay, when I was...
Well, you come out of a theater family, too, right?
Yes, okay.
We know it better than you.
In the beginning there was... Yeah.
Family business.
Well, there was Adam and Eve. And then a lot of
bad.
generations. And then my father was James Broderick, an actor, who I grew up watching on stage kind of all over the country. I spent a lot of summers at various the O'Neill summer stock places more and watched him. And I guess that's where I started wanting to be an actor. Although I didn't really admit that for years until I was in my late teens in high school, and then I started really is where I learned most of my acting school type stuff was in high school, believe it or not, you know. It gets a bad reputation sometimes,
Here in town?
I think. Yeah, at Walden, which doesn't exist anymore. But I did 3 plays a year, you know, and I learned a lot. And after that, I studied with Uta Hagen a little bit, and then I was lucky enough to get a job when I was 19, which was Torch Song Trilogy with Harvey Fierstein, which is a great way to begin because you've seen everything.
You got all the scar tissue for the rest of
Yeah, literally fist fights backstage. Yeah,
Darling, whatever.
and that led to Brighton
Brighton
Beach
Beach.
with this one, and at the same time as I got cast in Brighton Beach, I got movies and then everything.
The same
started
day they
working a
cast
lot.
him in Max Dugan's Return, and he got, when I went out from my last audition, they said, you're going to be playing it with Matthew, and we just cast him in our movie, too. So he did the movie first.
Yeah, and I was so excited that day, mostly by the play. I thought Brighton Beach was such a fantastically good part, and a wonderful play. And Neil Simon, who I thought really was a factory that made shows. I didn't know it was a guy until that day. And there he was, you know, and I just was so delighted to get
directed
that role. Gene Sachs.
Gene Sachs, yes.
Yeah.
It was Herb Ross.
It was Herb Ross.
Ross.
That's interesting. Herb Ross cast me
us.
and all of us,
Us.
and then jumped ship
I'm going to
about
get to you.
a few weeks before.
And
What was
didn't
your
make any
life?
casting changes.
That's right. Thank you, Matthew.
Well, I wanted to ask,
I want to know about Elizabeth on that side, about her life.
okay, that's where I was going, actually.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
But I also wanted to find, as we go
time out.
along, yes, no,
We
as we
still
go
have a
along,
half a minute, but we'll take that another minute.
as we go along, also to discuss a little bit, because all of you have had screen experience as well, is the differences in how you scale. But tell us about your life.
My life. I saw, I've always wanted to be an actor since I was 5 years old. It was either a missionary or an actress. My mother wanted me to be a missionary. I feel it's the same thing. But
It is the
anyway,
same.
it's the same thing. But anyway, so
Better living conditions.
right. I saw in the 17 magazine back in Akron, Ohio, of the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and I went there at 19. I left Ohio and came to New York and went to the American Academy. But the beautiful thing, what happened to me, all my training came from a wonderful couple that ran one of those, they're now almost all gone, summer theaters, where you can go and you can do 16 plays in 16 weeks, and you do everything in that. You do the stage managing, you do the lights, you learn theater, and you learn how to just get characters and create them and get up there and do it. And I spent about 4 years with them in my early 20s. Also, I was always told, which is interesting, my graduation from the American Academy, the president said, you probably will not work until you are Millie Dunnick's age. Now, Millie Dunnick, you know, because I was always an older soul. I was an older soul. So I said, do you mind if I try? And she said, no, you can try, you know. I remember that day so clearly. And of course now, Millie Dunnick originated Linda Lohman many years ago, 50 years ago. And so then I, from there, from the Summer Theater, they created a new play was being created up there. One Night Stands of B.B. Fenstermaker. It was a very old play, and it came to New York. And I then understudied all those characters. I was playing a woman who was in her 60s, so there was no way when I came to New York that I was going to play this mother. So I understudied all the women. And then it went from there on.
What was the Summer Theater, just out of curiosity?
It was called Dorset Playhouse up in Dorset,
And what was the
Vermont.
couple, just for posterity?
Oh, please, yes. Pat and Fred Carmichael. And she was a director, actress, and he was a writer, actor. And I give them my life. I mean, I would not be here if it weren't for them.
That's great.
You're a product of University of California?
Well, yeah,
Drama school?
but
And Radha, too. You were
Lambda.
Lambda, sorry. Ooh.
Yeah.
The other one.
So the other one, yeah.
Yeah. It was, for some reason, it was my dream to go to an English drama school. I was a real Anglophile, and so I got accepted for London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art and went there for 2 years, and came back. I mean, I look back now, and I think I would have been better off. I think I would have gone further, faster, had I gone to Juilliard or Yale, you know, because I would have had a network, I would have known people. Came back, wonderful training, but I came back cold. Nobody knew me, I knew nobody. But I worked for years in regional theater, just all over the place. Manitoba, Canada, Cincinnati, Ohio, Charles Playhouse in Boston, the Arena Stage. I mean, just the Goodman, everywhere. And then I finally got a show in New York, The Effect of Gamma Rays on Man in the Moon Marigolds, in which I was sort of playing a nice little cameo. And then I was understudying the two girls, and then I got to play both parts for the next. They both left rather quickly after, and I played both of them for the next 2 years. But it's just it's been a long, hard haul.
How did you get those original jobs?
Oh, the original jobs, they had, I don't know, they must still have them, the Theater Communications Group,
TCG,
auditions.
right.
Yes, they do.
And I came back from Lambda and I did those, and I did my, you know, my 3-minute classical and my 3-minute modern, whatever. And I got all of these, you know, people want to talk to you. You get this little list of, you know, offers or people who want to talk. And various people. And then Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park, I went there for a big, long, long summer season and did, you know, 5 plays or whatever, and just went from there, you know. But it's heavy, slow going, long.
Thank heavens for regional theater, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
We would not be here if we weren't, you know. Yeah.
You're a Columbia.
Well, I went to
University.
Columbia, but I didn't do any acting there. I played football at Columbia, and then I was in the Marine Corps for 5 years, and during a disturbance in Southeast Asia.
5 years?
About 5 years in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, I was going to say that. You know,
And then I got out,
Indian
and
enlistment.
by that time I had a wife and 2 kids with one on the way. And so my father expected me to go to law school or graduate school or whatever, and for some unaccountable reason I said, no, I want to be an actor. Well, you know, to an Irish working-class family in Brooklyn, especially when you have 2 kids, this was kind of an unusual announcement to make.
What brought you to that feeling?
I have no idea. I had done some acting in high school. Had a wonderful high school teacher. We probably all can mention some person who changed our lives. And this guy's name was Chris Sweeney, and he was a tough, working class. But there are these wonderful Irishmen who are intellectuals, self-made intellectuals. He was a reader and a thinker and a philosopher. And he got me started acting in this high school in Brooklyn, this very tough Catholic high school, all boys, ties, jackets and ties. And in those days, you know, there wasn't this ban on corporal punishment. They'd whack you just as soon as look at you. In fact, I remember many times walking down the hall, whack! Brother, what did I do? He said, nothing. That's just a warning. That's just, you know, keep me. The warning was to make sure you keep your eyes open at all times. Anyway, we did. I guess it's okay to say Macbeth in here, right?
No, we talk about it as
I was 14. I was 14 years old. Robert Klein was telling me last night that he makes a point of going into the theater all the time and saying, Macbeth, Macbeth.
Ryan! Ryan, we all have performances tonight.
Anyway, so...
Don't do that. Don't ever do that.
So I did Macbeth at 14. And in front of this very tough audience, okay? This is 500 really tough Brooklyn Irish Catholic kids, Italian Catholic kids. And people always say, God, boy, that was really, really tough, brave thing to do. And I said, you think that was brave? You should have seen the poor kid who played Lady Macbeth. And it was. He was dressed up in a dress, and he came out and gave it his best shot. For all I know, he may still be wearing it. But that's how it all started. But then I got away from it for 10 years. And then when I came back from the service, I just said, you know, one of the good things about the service is that, or at least in my case, you know, you mature quickly. You have to. So you get through all that stuff that you have to usually put up with in your 20s and 30s, and you really get to the end, you're saying, okay, what do I want to do with my life? Because this is a precious piece of time. And this is what I decided to do. So 10 years of driving cabs and driving trucks and working in bars, and I was an overnight success.
What was the first job? Was it in film or?
It was a great day. Its story is probably. I'll never forget. I was doing a tour with Harold J. Kennedy. Remember Harold? Mm-hmm. Sweet old man. Doing a summer tour, playing a small part. Came back. Was up at the Equity Lounge. This was 1 week in July of, I don't know, 72 or 73. And someone said, you know, they're casting this play. Comedians, and they're trying to find this Irish comic, Mike Nichols and so forth. I called my agent, who could not, you know, was not very particularly interested in me or my career. All right, I'll make a phone call. So I went over to the cattle call. Right, there's 300 guys standing in line. You walk out on stage. There's work light. It's just like all the movies. This stage manager is reading the lines, and you know, chewing gum at the same time, and maybe drinking coffee. And there are 3 people out in the dark you can't even see, and it just happened to be the casting director. And I read this for this part of McBrain, who's a Northern Irish comic, very funny. He tells a joke, and I know how to do the Northern Irish dialect, which is tricky. And I had met a friend of mine who was standing in line with me, Chris McCarran, who's an Irish actor. And you know, he was a carpenter, and I was a bartender. This is what we really were. And 15 minutes, she's trying to tell you.
Forget it. This is better.
And runs all the time. You know everything.
Yeah, and we were standing in line. He says, listen, we'll have coffee. You know, I'll meet you at the Howard Johnson's. Used to be right there on Times Square. I said, okay.
It still is.
Still there?
It's the only thing that's still there.
Yeah. So I go out and I read, and it was good. I knew it was good. Not that I thought anything was going to lead to anything, but it was just good. Something, I can still remember it. So I walk out through the stage doors, this long line of guys all standing there, and Chris is waiting outside in the alleyway, and I walk up to him, and I can still remember this vividly. I'm 37 years old, 38 years old, and I've been doing this for too long. As we're walking down the alleyway, the door bangs open, and it's one of the casting people. She says, Brian. And I stopped, and I turned around. She said, can you come back this afternoon at 2 o'clock? And I can still remember it was like this finger. It just came down and just touched me on my head. And I can still remember looking at Chris and him looking at me, and everything was different. And it was. I came back that afternoon for Nichols and Trevor Griffiths, blew the walls out. I mean, it was just, and that's, I remember Mike Nichols walking down the aisle after the audition. And he stopped and he looked at me for a minute and he said, where did you come from? Just like that. So that's when it all started. And it started in that minute. It was interesting because, I mean, everything up to it was preparation for it in some funny way. But I'm one of the people who can actually point at that particular moment and say, that's when it changed. And it did, big time.
That's what gives everybody hope in the theater. That moment comes along. That's what it's all
I'm going
about.
to just take a second to explain why, for some of you sailors here, why you don't whistle on stage. You don't whistle on stage because in Elizabethan England and in the theaters, most of the stagehands who knew rigging were sailors. And when you wanted to drop a sail, you whistled. So if you whistled on stage, someone would drop something on your head. And that's why you never whistle on stage. And that's the derivation of that. A little bit of history.
These seminars are so wonderful.
It's full of trivia, but that's why you'd never do that, because someone will drop something on your head. The old sailors would do that. Yeah. That stopped everything in its track, but anyway. It's very important.
Now it's just a button on a computer. You know?
That's right, and you still get hit on the head.
Nobody's there.
Unfortunately, it doesn't work half the time.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's an interesting technical problem that people have to be prepared for. What to do when the set stops. And it does.
Oh, yeah.
Sure does.
We had it several times.
We've had several times.
Several times.
And then the stage manager, ladies and gentlemen, if you'll excuse us for a moment, because stop the play right here.
And in fact, in Chicago, we lost 2 shows, right?
Well, in New York, we had a preview audience. We had a big preview audience. And, of course, my friend Brian Cox happens to be there. And he's like a Jonah. Every time he comes, you can be convinced that it's going to be a disaster. And the round table stopped 3 or 4 times that night. The minute he walked through the door, I knew what was...
How much rehearsal did you have?
We started rehearsals January 10th, and we opened February 10th. But we had rehearsed it in... We had to put in a few new people, and... but we pretty much knew, it was pretty much, hasn't really changed much from Chicago.
No, it hasn't. No, it's just deepened. Yeah.
How often have you seen this?
Have I seen it? I had never, actually, funny thing is I've never seen them.
Yeah.
I've seen them, I saw the Lee J. Cobb movie of the television show, and I saw the Volker Schlondorf's movie with Dustin, which was terrific. And my whole thing about Willie, I was much more interested, I mean, Willie is Willie, but I was fascinated by the element of mental illness. That was the study that I did. I did a lot of work on depression and bipolar presentation, what happens when somebody is losing control and stuff like that and is swinging back and forth. And so that's really the only different
Your
kind of
wonderful
research.
gesture. Is that you or the director?
Well, I was.
I
I watched films of severe bipolar depressives, and there was this constant thing going on all the time, flicking, touching gestures.
It's
I didn't want to go.
extraordinary piece.
I didn't want to go that far with it, but I use it from time to time. And then the pockets, hands flicking in the pockets. They're always checking to see if they're there, you know. And anyway.
Was that you or with
No, that was my.
or your director?
No, that was me. No. Bob just kept saying, I kept saying to Bob in Chicago, and Elizabeth was there, and I kept saying, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. I mean, I have no idea. And he kept saying, don't think about it, just do it. Because Willie doesn't
get
think.
out of your head, yeah.
Willie's not an intellectual type. He doesn't live an examined life. So the last thing you should do is examine it, I guess. But, anyway.
Let's talk also about, because we talked about seeing screening of films of this. I personally feel that, for instance, just parenthetically, that Death of a Salesman is a play. And it is quintessentially a play.
Exactly
you can
right.
fool around with it on the screen, but it's a play.
It never works.
And it doesn't really, because of the intimacy and the bouncing off of acting. But if you would tell, because you all have had this experience in film and television, how do you scale your acting? What do you do differently, or do you do nothing differently for this? I mean, you've all had this.
I think any good actor naturally plays the size of the room without thinking about it. It's, you know, obviously very different for camera because there's, you know, they seldom see your legs, and it's, I mean, unless it's a really long shot, then it doesn't matter what's happening on your face. I mean, you know, you get to know these things. It's here, and then it's here.
And I think you have so much less responsibility as an actor
Oh, yeah.
in the movies because someone else is making all of the artistic choices. On the stage, everyone on the stage is responsible for the whole deal.
So much more control. over
Whereas in the movies, not only at the moment is someone else making the decisions, but in the editing room, whole lots of decisions that you have nothing to do with, so that in a way it's relaxing and narcissistic in a way that the theater isn't. You know, for that moment that you're in the movies, all attention is focused, but I always feel that the actors aren't quite grown-ups in the movies. And actors are grown-ups in the theater. I don't, because you made lots more movies. So.
Well, the thing about the movies is there's always a car outside to pick you up and take you to the show.
Oh, well, there's that, too.
In the theater, you got to get there yourself.
Oh, we have our buses.
They
though.
do treat you like adults in the theater. There's no question about it. You mean nobody's going to call me and pick me up and take me? But I think personality counts for an enormous amount in film. There's a great story about Akim Tamirov, who did a picture with Gary Cooper called The General Died at Dawn. Tamirov was from the Moscow Art Theater, and he was one of the great Stanislavski, and he had worked with all these guys, and I guess had come to America after the Revolution, and went to Hollywood, and was a very powerful and interesting screen actor for many years. And Robert Preston told me this story before he died. God love him. He was one of the great guys. Preston was under contract at Paramount, and so was Tamirov. And they met at a coffee shop, and he says, "Tommy, how you doing?" He says, "Bob, it's the damnedest thing." He says, "I'm making this picture in Northern California called The General Died at Dawn. I am working with this Locks, Gary Cooper." You know, Gary Cooper, big, tall man, he can't act at all. I'm telling you, Bob, this man is no actor. He is terrible. He does nothing. He stands there, nothing. I, by the way, am brilliant in this movie. I am wonderful in this movie. I am acting my ass off. Everybody's watching it. We don't see a dailies for 6 weeks. We finally come back to where we can see dailies to some civilization. They put dailies in, and I, Hakim Tamirov, am watching Gary Cooper. And that's the way it is. I mean, you take those close-ups of somebody like Cooper, and you can't take your eyes off.
It's all in the eyes in film. But the other thing about film and television is you miss that magic word, rehearsal.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's what I love about the theater. You have that gestation period. You know, you go home, you sleep on it, you have a day's rehearsal, you sleep on it. Your subconscious goes to work on the material and the whole process, you know. In film, I mean, you arrive the night before in location, you have a 6 a.m. call. At 6:30, you meet the guy playing your husband. You say, "Okay, we're going to start with the scene where he tells you he's leaving you. Go." And it's like...
Or worse, you get into bed.
Yes, right.
But I think that acting in film is harder, really, than in the theater, because it's done in such short clips. Where in the theater, you're really living it, and you're bringing it, the whole thing begins to make sense to you as the story unfolds, and you keep on going. But suddenly, in movies, to have just this scene completely out of context,
Well, there's something
There's an easy
How do
thing
you
to
do
that,
that?
Harder in a
too.
way, but not...
You can do anything.
Because
for
you
men.
have to, you go home at night and, oh, I've got to learn my lines, and it's one page, you know, where you say, I'll get that, and see you tomorrow.
Get the card, George.
That's a day.
And then you shred it, and you never ever do that scene again, and then it's a whole new
Yeah,
thing the
so
next day. The variety
some
of it
ways you
is
can
there.
focus a lot, almost too much in a film. You get like, well, I wonder if I should open the door with my right hand when I say...
Right.
Whereas on the stage, you would just be like, I have that scene coming, so let me get that door open so he can come in, and which is, I like. It's something very
The
nice
thing about
that,
the
'cause you
stage
don't
is
focus
it
on
is
these
primitive.
little-
I mean, the whole point about the theater is that it's primitive. It's you and the audience. Okay, 10,000 years ago in Salamanca, Spain, there was some guy up in a cave telling a story with his gestures and so forth. And that's what we do. I mean, there are no filters. There's no director. There's no editor. It's just you and the audience. And so that there is a basic quality to the theater that doesn't exist in film.
And when it works like nothing else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody knows that, you know, and it works. It continues to work, even if you ever had the experience of taking someone who's never been to the theater, and watch it happen. They are
And it can only happen in the theater. That's the tragic thing about, you should pardon the expression, the Disneyfication of Broadway, because those things are wonderful. I mean, Lion King's great fun. I think it's beautifully staged, and there's a lot of stuff to watch it, just to care about. But when you see a play like Wit, or Death of a Salesman, or Iceman Cometh, you can be changed by that. I mean, something can happen in that theater. I watch it every night. I watch people, not everybody, and not every night. But something can happen in the theater that just doesn't happen in films and will never happen in film.
The exciting thing is in one of the Wings programs of bringing youngsters to the theater, the majority of them have never been to a Broadway theater, never been to Broadway, never been out of their own neighborhood. But the minute you say there are tickets available for a show on live theater, the hands go up immediately. They don't know what they're going to see, but the magic of that word, of live theater, and they've been reared on television and movies.
Student matinees.
But
Did
the
you all
live
have
theater,
them?
so
They
exciting.
love
The
it.
best.
Have they been coming to Night Must Fall too?
Yeah, we
that
had,
must be incredible.
And I
for
thought
them.
this is 1935 in the countryside in Britain. They're going
What
to
do
not
they
understand
care?
a word
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah. It's like-
And they were just like,
there.
so, they're fabulous.
You have those
And afterwards,
seminars
they
afterwards,
understood
those
everything.
question
They
answer things, they're just
great questions.
They're either really good or really bad.
They were great. I'm from Seward Park, and I want
It's
to say
true
that
of
was the
everybody in
greatest
every
thing.
audience.
The kids are absolutely honest, though. I mean, that you know if you haven't got the kid.
Right.
Yeah, talk about coughing.
Whoa! And the,
Killer!
You usually play good guys. I somehow think of you always as a good guy.
Yeah.
But now you're having
Well,
an
this is a
opportunity to
good
be
guy.
the bad guy. A
Yeah.
good guy, bad guy. But you get did that,
Yes.
is what, that attracted you to the part, or what
Well, it was
it?
nice to think of, yeah, because I don't ever get to do that, very rarely. And he's an angry person.
Is he
Yeah.
insane? Is this what you come to the conclusion?
Well, he did more research
Yeah,
than
that's
me, I don't
what
know.
made me think of it. Did you? What is
Yes,
your
I
take on
suppose he is. I think, though, he has his reasons, you know. He is insane because rather than just get mad and yell at somebody, he puts a pillow over their head and stuff like that. But he's a very resentful servant from a time when servants or that class had no chance to better themselves, and he's as bright as anybody around him. And he just does not like taking orders from people at this point in his life, I guess. I mean, that's a very general way to put it. And he has a problem with his mom and women things. He's got a few issues there, too. But I think the one thing that isn't so crazy and is understandable is his just tremendous resentment at being working class in England at that time.
A real rage.
Matthew,
He's a rage.
you have to now
Rage.
take orders from me because we have to stop for just a minute. And you can all stretch and you can turn around and then come back to your seats immediately because we start right again on this wonderful panel of working in the theater.
This is CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Welcome back to the American Theatre Wing seminar on working in the theater. Before we return to our panelists, I'd like to tell you that the Wing is more than a sponsor of seminars and more than our famous Tony Awards, which are given for excellence in the craft of theater. We are an organization whose year-round programs are dedicated to serving the theater and the community with the goal of developing new audiences. And to achieve that goal, we have created audience development programs for students, like Introduction to Broadway, which began 7 years ago, and has enabled more than 75,000 New York City high school students to attend a Broadway show. For many of them, for the very first time, and through our newest program, Theater in School, theater professionals like these in our seminar panels go directly into classrooms to work with and talk to students about working in the theater. In addition, we have our hospital program, which dates back to World War II, and our legendary stage door canteen. Today's version of the program utilizes talent from Broadway, off-Broadway, and the cabaret world to entertain patients in nursing homes, veterans hospitals, children's wards, and AIDS centers, all in the New York area, bringing the magic of theater to those who cannot get to the theater itself. We are proud of the work we do and happy for the wonderful working relationship we have with the theatrical community. And we are grateful to everyone who makes what the American Theater Wing does possible. And now, let's get back to our performance seminar. And I'd like to start part 2 with a question to the panel. I'd like to know, what is your favorite role? What it brought to you, what it meant to you. Could you start with that?
Kathleen, why don't you?
Kathleen?
That's always a hard question because the role I'm doing now is my favorite role now.
Up till now, again.
Up till now, I guess. I've been, as I said, very lucky. So I've had all the 6 people I played in Angels in America were astounding. I don't know. I can't answer this question in a very sensible way. That was my answer.
Henry V.
Oh, and Henry V. Well, that was nice too. Though I wasn't playing Henry.
I know.
Would have been nice.
Well, it's like picking a sibling over another in a way, so I hate to do it, but I guess Eugene Morris Jerome, really, you know, if I really was being honest, which I did with Elizabeth. That was a wonderful time, and sort of the first time I'd been on Broadway.
A tougher question, then why?
Well, it fit me and my mood at that period. You know, every now and then a part comes at the right time for you, and or whatever happens, that all these lucky things have to happen, and the cast you're with. You know, we had a great thing.
Great
Elizabeth
family.
was just a vicious adversary as my mom. And, we would fight over cookies and butter and milk and shopping and roller skates, and they were battles.
Yes, yes.
And it was just great fun. It was wonderful, wasn't it?
It was a great time.
Weren't we great?
We were very good. And we were innocent. We were terribly innocent because we had never been on Broadway ever before. Neil found all of us off Broadway, except when Joyce joined us out in
she was
California.
a ringer.
She was the ringer, and I mean, so
Angelico.
it was... Angelico?
Maybe he hadn't been on Broadway.
No, not Broadway. We were all off Broadway.
That's right.
And Peter Michael Getz. It was just an incredible family. We were all terribly innocent. We all did everything together. And we were in California for, what, about 4 months, wasn't it?
San Francisco and
yes,
LA.
and LA. That's where we started the play. So
Was that your
it was a
favorite, or
great
do you have
time.
another one?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I can't. I'm like Kathleen. I can't tell you. I mean, it would have to be between Kate and Sister Mary and now Linda Lohman. I mean, she just has possessed me with this man here. I'm possessed with him, too.
Swoosie.
My favorite role is usually always the one I'm doing at the moment. In this case, Myrna and Myra, my favorite roles, because I think, you know, we were talking earlier about research and so forth and learning. It's amazing how the older you get, the more life experience you have. That in itself is rehearsal and research for whatever you're going to do. I did 6 Degrees at Lincoln Center years ago, and I recently did a kind of thing. It was a radio play of it in LA, but we did it in front of a live audience. And it was amazing how much better I was. I mean, I was good at it in New York, but I mean, it was so much deeper. People would see me think, you know, you were terrific, but this was like 9 more years of life was amazing. And so to come back to something was so neat. But anyway, I digress. But I think, for me, it has to be the role I'm playing now, because It's the most difficult thing I've ever done. It's the largest part I've ever done. It's the most daunting and impossible task I've ever attempted. And it's me now, you know. Hopefully I'll get better and better, but it's certainly, and of course Bananas in House of Blue Leaves is always close to my heart.
I think that because acting on stage is the definition of existentialism. I mean, it exists while you're doing it. And then, if you're lucky, it exists in the minds and the memories of the people who have seen it, and yours as well. But it is totally existential. It's just happening while you're there. It would be impossible, I think, for me not to say that the most significant role is the one that I'm doing now, because it's not only the part that you're playing now, but you're living with that character. There's no way to not live with him. I mean, I wake up every day, a part of me being Willie, and I get through the day, a part of me being Willie, and thinking about what I have to do that night, and trying to unconsciously, some cases subconsciously, some cases consciously preparing. So it's hard to answer that question, but I think, I think Kathleen was right. It's essentially what you're doing while you're doing it. I mean, it's fascinating about this business that you do it and then it's gone. And then you do it again and it's gone again. And you do it again and it's gone again. And you have a tendency to kind of forget that and think about what I'm doing tonight, what I'm doing next week, what I'm doing tomorrow. And then someone comes up to you on the street and says, I saw a show a week ago or 2 weeks ago or 20 years ago, and I can't tell you what it means to me, and all of a sudden you realize that it does have a life. Mm-hmm. But it's a life that exists in someone's mind, in someone's memory. So it has a significance, it has an importance that can't be quantified, but the fact is that Willie right now is the one that...
But it's interesting, you come off, you come off a great hickey, too, in Iceman. And then and you did Cornelius Melody.
Melody, I love Melody.
Yeah, and, but somehow those characters in my head are related in terms of the fantasy world and...
Melody is, fortunately, it's a play that Bob Falls and I had a history, up until this one, of doing plays that people talked about and people thought were great plays, but were never done. We did Galileo, we did Iceman Cometh, and we did Touch of the Poet. And interestingly enough, the most orphaned of that three is Touch of the Poet. It was never actually prepared for production, even by O'Neill. And it's a wonderful play. It's a great play. And so there was always a tendency to kind of look at those stepchildren and say, God, I wish more people could have seen that. So yeah, Con is a great character. But there is a relationship. It's fascinating to me that now, in 1999, this winter in New York, you would have Iceman Cometh and Death of a Salesman playing. These were plays that were written within, O'Neill probably wrote most of Iceman in 1939, 1940. It wasn't produced until about 1945. Obviously, the war intervened. But Miller certainly had to be affected by the play, influenced by it to some extent. And it's interesting that at a time when America was at the apogee of its power and its self-confidence and its success, and come through the war, that these two very kind of dismal plays about being American and being what America was all about would be produced. But and for them both to be revived successfully some 50 years later. It's a very interesting coincidence.
I was wondering, as you've done so much research into the mind and character of Willie, if you knew what he has in the suitcases, or is it all metaphorical?
Well, it's funny because Arthur is very adamant about that. When anybody asks him, and people always ask him, what is Willie selling? And Arthur says, himself.
And you tell yourself that as well?
Because
they look real heavy.
Himself, and it gets harder and harder to carry those bags because he's got a lot more rocks in those suitcases as he gets older. But I go along with Arthur's answer to that question. He's carrying himself.
How long is it with you after the curtain comes down, and how much do you bring? How soon do you have to start thinking about it, or does it begin to take place before the curtain goes up?
I think now there's more relaxed element to it. I mean, if I get through the last 10 minutes and I haven't had a coronary, there's no paramedics on stage pumping on my chest, then there is a certain amount of gratitude involved. And there's just this wonderful ambivalence that you have where you really enjoy doing the part and you can't wait till it's over at the same time.
Yeah. You get to the penultimate scene and you think,
one more entrance.
and then what happens? Then
you take the bow, and the bows. What's fascinating about this production, and it's unique in my history. Now, I get a big kick out of coming out and looking out as you take the bows because you see the damnedest expressions on people's faces.
Stunned.
Tears.
Sobbing.
And their faces are just open in a way that you rarely see people's faces open. I mean, they're just...
Yes.
They're moved in some way, and that's
I've not ever heard the silence that comes after that wonderful last line there in any of the productions I've seen.
How about wit? I would think that must stay with you too. And then Elizabeth, you must.
Well, it does. So the end, because the end of Wit is so triumphant.
Sure.
It's a different issue than Death of a Salesman. There's a moment of grace at the end of the play, and people always asked, how could you die 8 times a week? And I think it is because of that. I think that if the play ended somewhere else, it would be much more difficult to do. I didn't realize that until I was doing it for a while. And I had the same experience that Brian was saying, to look out at the audience and see people's response, and people hang around.
They want to.
After the play. We have talkbacks every Tuesday night, and 70% of the audience stay. And after, by the time we come out, there are people still kind of hanging around the theater, and I think it's a safe place, in a way. And we have been, for the last week, raising money for Doctors Without Borders. And people's response has been astounding. We raised $16,000 in 1 week with a curtain speech and 2 actors carrying baskets. Wow. It is the people, it's an example of what the power of the theater, what we've all been talking about, that people are opened in all sorts of ways.
When they cast you in this, did they tell you would have to shave your head?
Yes, they told me I have to shave my head in the other part. I'm naked in a part in the play, but that's in the stage directions, and so you're reading the play, and my brother, as you know, had read the play too, so read the play and I got the part, and I was worried about being bald, but I thought I could manage that. But then my brother said, "What are you going to do about the nudity?" And I said, "Nudity?" That was harder.
You mentioned bows, something we've never talked about. Do you take direction on bows? How much attention is given to taking bows at the end of curtain calls?
Depends on the director.
I'm always fascinated by the difference in curtain calls.
I'm always suspicious of a production where the curtain calls are more carefully directed than the play. And I've seen a few like that.
It's important to do curtain, because it's ungracious not to. There's you go through a whole period where you say, I don't do curtain calls, I don't bow or anything. And it seems that's ungracious, too. So you have to
let the audience have their moment.
Should you stay in character when you do your...
I don't think so, really.
Not really.
You don't want to break the mood?
I think that's the time to say it was a play, in a way. That's the time for everybody, for us and the audience, to say, we've been watching a play, and now we're back to our life, sort of.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll have a night where there just aren't any laughs, and you think, well, what's happening here? And then the curtain call, they're just, like you said, you look out and see the faces, and it's just, and all the time they've just been going like that, but they don't laugh out loud.
Well, maybe they're glad it's over.
That never occurred to me.
Don't think about that
anymore. They do get more energetic sometimes,
Right.
It's not easy to applaud while you're putting your coat on at the same time.
Sometimes they do look back while they're putting the coat on.
Right, right as they're walking up the aisle.
What about people who come in late? Do you notice that?
Oh, yeah. We have this
You're supposed
really...
to be
I mean, it's
concentrating.
interesting because Miller wrote this very delicate scene at the beginning of the play, which actually has the whole play in the scene. It tells you exactly what's going to happen. And you have latecomers, and the flashlights, and the murmurings, and the rustlings, and it's maddening because there aren't so many people out there, it's just like Matthew said before, who really want to watch it and listen to it. And you have to remember that they're the majority, and you're playing to them. But, you know, that's the thing. You just have to get that stuff behind you. You just have to not worry about it and just keep on going. I mean, the telephones and the and then the ones that put on the earphones and crank it all the way up. So you get this feedback.
We have some questions from the audience, and there are so many that I'm sorry to interrupt you, but let's start with them right now for these young people.
Hi, my name's Bree Lynn, and my question is for all of you. I'm wondering what kind of preparation you do every night from the time you walk in the door of the theater until the curtain goes up.
I find that I can't prepare for an entire play. You know, I can only go moment to moment. I can only prepare really for my opening scene. I mean, I try to do beyond. You know, I go, oh, I have that breakdown in Act 2. I better get, you know, worked up. It just doesn't work. It's too far down the line. There are too many moments between now and then. So I just take it one step at a time.
I had the great privilege of working with Peter Brook, and he said a fascinating thing. He came back to see the show after 4 weeks. We did Cherry Orchard in Brooklyn, and after ripping us to shreds for 20 minutes about what had happened, he began to say, he said something that was really very interesting. He said, now look, he said, you're all preparing to go on stage. He said, no one prepares to live their life. You've done that. You've rehearsed the play. You walk on stage. Let the play happen to you. In my case, it's fascinating. Howard Witt, who plays Charlie, because I'm saying to myself, oh my God, how do I get ready to do this? And Howard Witt said, go out and pick up the bags.
Yeah, start with them.
And, you know, the preparation really has been done. I mean, there are people who do all kinds of exercises, and there are certain physical preparations that make sense. But, you know, the thing to do is to go out there and let the play happen to you.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Nandita Shenoy, and my question is directed to Mr. Dennehy. Before that golden moment that you described earlier in the program, I'm wondering what kept you going in the craft.
I don't know. Stubbornness, probably, more than anything. I can't tell you how many people used to say to me in those days, actor? You're not an actor. You don't look like an actor. You don't sound like an actor. And I couldn't disagree. You know, it wasn't like... My father was one of them, by the way. Who, with him, it was a mantra, you know. Errol Flynn is an actor. Yeah. But, I don't know. You know, the funny thing is that...
Errol Flynn.
As I look back on it now, and I don't know why I kept doing it. It's because God knows it was not easy. I never had any training because I was working. I mean, I was driving a cab, I was driving a truck, I was supporting a family at the same time I was trying to make it in the business. So I'll be damned if I know.
Thank you.
Mildred Clendon for Kathleen Chalfant. You played a number of roles in Angel on Broadway. I never look at a program before. I like to see if I can recognize people or how they change or what they do. You played several parts, and then a rabbi came on. And I couldn't get over the verity of that characterization. He was wonderful. I don't know why it struck me that way as a character. And I had to look through and see, and there I saw the ultimate exposition of an oxymoron. Kathleen Chalfant playing a rabbi, in addition to the other roles. Now, you talked about research, everybody did. How did you do any research for that?
Well, first, Mildred and I have worked together, so it was very peculiar, the rabbi, because I was invited to be part of Angels in America at the very beginning of it, and there was a reading up in the upstairs at the New York Theater Workshop, and I was late for the reading, and Tony gave me the script, and he said, you play the rabbi and the doctor and Ethel Rosenberg and the mother. And I said, fine. And the rabbi is actually the first speech in Millennium Approaches. And this rabbi came out that came out of my mouth. And that happens sometimes, you know, they just come out. And he always was there. And I I never could figure out where he could possibly have come from. And about 4 years later, my husband and I were in the kitchen and the radio was on, and they were playing an old Jack Benny radio program, and Mr. Kitzel came on. And I realized that in my childhood ear, Mr. Kitzel had gone, and he came out waiting to be the rabbi. So you never know.
Nothing is ever wasted.
It took a long time before I dared tell Tony Kushner that that's where
It's all this thing about hair, whether it's facial hair or
yes, right, bald men.
hair, whatever.
Hello, my name is Ann Block. It's directed to all of you. Have you ever gone up on a line on Broadway, and if you did, how did you handle it?
Like last night?
Every night. That happens a lot. I mean, and to other actors, and hopefully everybody's paying attention and somebody will
Help you.
Will get it moving again. If you sort of don't panic, somehow it works out. I remember one time, when an actor named Željko Ivanek, that's the worst I've ever seen that happen. I was doing a scene with him, and he had a big monologue, and he was halfway through it, and he was at the climax of it, he said, and I put the dirt on his shoes, and then Mrs. Stroheim looked at me, and he looked at me, and he looked at me, and he went totally stark raving up and grabbed me finally in a hug, and I know what he wanted me to tell him, which was what was next. But I said, I don't know. Because this was about, this was maybe 8 months into the run, and I hadn't paid attention to that scene for maybe 4 months at that point, right? Because he talked the whole time, and I would sit there going, and I realized I have no idea what you're up to. And the stage manager came and with the book.
Oh, no!
Couldn't hear anything she was saying. It was awful. I remember then afterwards, sorry to blab on, but I came off stage, and from then on I did listen, by the way. That's something that happens when you're in a run on a long time.
Sure,
you have these sections where you just tune out. At least I do.
We have this wonderful moment where I get fired, this firing sequence. Uncle Ben appears, of course, as a Dreams character. And he comes in and he says, and it's so critical too, it's because he says, I've been up to Alaska, and I just bought a lot of timberland. The line is timberland, and I need a man to run it for me. And for some reason, this particular night, and it's very heightened, I mean, we've just seen this firing sequence, the audience is. He says, I've just been to Alaska, and I bought a lot of real estate. And I need a man to run it for me. Now I'm walking over towards him, just being fired, and I'm... because now I got to turn around and say, real estate? But I tell you something, real estate and timberland are two different things.
And remember, the whole scene, he was trying to think of that word.
Yeah, he was.
Those eyes were going.
When they get those pinwheel eyes, you know, that's it. He's up, boy.
And he never knew.
Real estate.
Okay. Oh, my name is John Francis Fox. My question is for Kathleen Chalfant. Since this is the second play you've done in which a lead character is dying, can you tell us if there's been a difference in the way audiences have reacted to Wit and to Angels in America?
I think audiences have responded differently to the two plays, but they're very different plays. The thing that they have in common, I think, is that the ends of both of these plays are triumphant, and people respond to it. The people have treated both plays in the same way, as though they're safe places to come to deal with complex issues. We know in the talkbacks that we have with Wit that people talk about death quite a lot. I think people want to do that. People need to do it because it's something that people don't discuss in the culture very much. I think the issues in Angels in America were political issues and issues about living, so the issue of death was not as central as it is in Wit.
I think we have time just for one more question.
Hi, my name is Melissa. I just wanted to know this question is for all the panelists. What advice do you have for young, aspiring actors or actresses?
Go to dental school.
Would you go around quickly?
Only do this if you have to. If you have to do it, then do it. If you can think of something else to do, do that.
It will require every ounce of energy and hope and exertion. It's climb every mountain, you know, for the rest of your life. I mean, you have to want this so badly because it's so impossible.
You have to have a great passion for it, a true passion, and a great belief in yourself, because you're not going to get that belief from other people.
Mm-hmm.
And you never take no for an answer. And if you really have that passion, there, you will be fulfilled eventually, but it's hard.
Matthew?
Well, my father once told me when I auditioned for something and didn't get the part, and I was like, I screwed it up or whatever, and he said, maybe they screwed it up. So I think that's something to keep in mind when you're starting. Somebody doesn't cast you, it may be, there's no reason to think they're right all the time. Just keep that in mind.
But there's always a cost. And the thing is, it's not just your cost.
I'm sorry.
You've got kids.
I just wish that we could go on and on and on. That's
Always gotten me off.
People
Well, you got it with
have
a
so much to
15-minute
say.
line, that's
This has been the American Theatre Wing Seminar on Working in the Theatre, coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. And I want to thank this wonderful panel who have shared their knowledge, experience, and time with us. And our gratitude to our two moderators, Pia Lindstrom and George White, for chairing this panel so very well. I'm Isabel Stevenson, Chairman of the American Theatre Wing, and thank you so much for coming. Thank you all for being here.